Again, good evening, everyone. And again, thank you for joining today. Um, so again, we will start as usual with quieting our mind by watching the breath mindfully for a few moments. Then we can try to cultivate good intention. For example, by thinking, contemplating, as long as there is the selfish attitude and self-gravity ignorance, our mind will be always disturbed by different negative affective emotions that arises from those ignorance and selfish attitude. And as long as our mind is disturbed by those negative affective emotions, no matter what external situation, our mind will be always unhappy, disturbed, agitated. Not only that, when those affective emotions arise, also more likely for us to engage in the more hurtful and harmful actions that bring more pain and suffering to others. Through either one of the three doors, or two doors, or three doors, for this peace in mind. in that way, then we'll bring more pain and suffering to ourselves and to others. Therefore, if we do not want to create more pain and suffering to others and oneself, we must try all our best to reduce and overcome those affected emotions as much as possible. By overcoming the root of those affected emotions. By cutting the very root of those affected emotions. And to do that, we need to develop the ultimate Bodhichitta mind. And in order to our wisdom realizing emptiness directly, to become an ultimate Bodhichitta mind, we need to cultivate the conventional Bodhichitta mind. And in order to generate and fully develop those two Bodhichitta minds, we need to practice, contemplate, meditate, and practice. So for that, we need to study, learn, how to cultivate them correctly. And we need to be encouraged, inspired, reminded of those practices. For that very reason and truth, that I'm going to listen, engage in discussion, reflection, contemplation. And may all of that activities become cause and conditions to achieve our own highest potential, the fully awakened state. So we can fulfill highest purpose of others and oneself. Okay?
Can you move the mic a bit closer? The volume is fading when you're talking a bit, so, okay.
Okay. Can we do the prayer? Do the plus. Mary, would you lead?
Yes, thank you, Geshe. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata Nor of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, atoms, and all aspects. With supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. Shayla, could we please go to the Heart Sutra? And then the mandala offering, and then refuge, please. Thank you. It's in the same. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling in Master Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Empty is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eyes, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhists who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata om gate gate pada tam gate bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharipati Putra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Ganbars, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. Please, the mandala offering. Thank you. Saji ki jushing meto tramri rabli ni de and hadi sange to me Choku nam dati chopato idam guru pratna mandalakam niryateyami. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodan soki chon janchu bardu dagi kapsu chi dagi chonin gipe sonam ki rola penter sangye trupa shos. Chodan soki chonam la donchu bardu dagni kapsuchi agi chonen gipe sonam ki rola penshir sange druparsho.
Can you hear? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Geshe.
So we just finished discussing from the Vesamata root text, a section of that, and then starting with the Nagarjuna's commentaries with that, and yeah, paying homage, and then formation to compose the text, and then mentioning of the ultimate Bodhichitta and conventional Bodhichitta, introducing that briefly, and then now you go more detailed in explanations on the verses from that Vesamata Root Sutta, So you go to the page number 1, and we are in verse number 5 or 4. So, the verse number 4, the self, okay, again, I don't know. We're reading the translation of the middle translation, Champagne. The self postulated by the extremists, even though I don't like this translation of extremists. In the actually is Kritika, as it is in other translation, is a particular school of one of the school of non-Buddhist earlier school of thought. So I think the extremists that I think that translation again. That is why in some translation you find better here, others there's when you truly analyze it with the reasoning within all the aggregate body and mind, nowhere can be you find a locus for this. So as we explained before, Kritika is one of the earliest school of thoughts. They proceed that there is a permanent, single or partless autonomous self. Okay, so that is what. Of course, we already have innate self-grasping. Everyone has an innate self-grasping. Not everyone, but like sentient beings, we have not had a direct realization of the emptiness. You already have the innate self-grasping. And when we talk about self-grasping, within the innate self-grasping, there's two levels of innate self-grasping. There is a self-grasping of autonomous self, as though there is a self that is like the leader who controls the subject. The aggregate as being like the subjects and the self being like the leader of the king. Something that control, we always feel that there is the self that is separate from that aggregate. Separate from that aggregate that is controlling the aggregate. And that self that is autonomous because it is separate from that aggregate. So there is one grasping of that. That is a little bit more kind of gross level. And on top of that, then of course there's more subtle level of self-grasping. The self-grasping of the self to exist inherently or existing from its own side by itself. There's that one grasping. On top of such two different levels of self-grasping, then when you have this concept of permanent and heartless and autonomous self, it only kind of make your self-grasping stronger, But they come with that kind of idea of self, And so then, here Nagarjuna refuting that self. So here he's saying, when such self is analyzed with the reasoning and logic, if you analyze, if there's such self as they proclaim or as they proceed, then, it had to found within the aggregates, within the aggregates, within the aggregates, within the 5 aggregates. So the 5 aggregates is the body and the mind, The first form aggregate is the body, and the rest 4 are the part of the mind. And if you try to find where is that self, where is that self, that you permanent in autonomous and that, and if you to find it, is that self within your body from the top of your crown, you go to scan from each of them, is my skull the self, is my brain the self, is my skeleton of the face, self, nose, eyes, and you can go one by one. And when you do, you cannot pinpoint and say, this is the self. You cannot find within any part of the body and pinpoint that this is the self. Nor, if you try to find that self within the consciousness, within the mind, nor you can find within the consciousness of the mind. Nor you can find within the sense consciousness, nor you can find within the mental consciousness. And so when we analyze that way, then it cannot be found. It cannot be found. And so when you analyze that way, when you cannot find, how can you say it exists? How can you say it exists? Because with that kind of analysis, it cannot be found. It cannot be found. So that is where nowhere it can be found. Find a locus for this, and therefore, there's no such permanent, partless, and autonomous self. If there is such self, then when you analyze, it should be more clear and clear, and you should be able to find it. But that is not the case. So the next ones, and in the aggregates, the 5 aggregates, exist, but they are not permanent. They are ever changing. They are ever changing. And again, that one we can understand directly. Our body is changing all the time. You don't need kind of profound reasoning and logic. We can experience that directly. Our body changes all the time. Our mind changes all the time. Our feeling changes all the time. Our discriminating mind changes all the time. Sometimes we feel this is good, sometimes we feel that is not good, sometimes we think this is right, sometimes we feel this is not right. Keep on changing. Those are and as well as our so is clear our aggregates are ever changing, impermanent, and therefore is not permanent. Therefore, such aggregates cannot be the self. They do not have the nature of selfhood. Therefore, that aggregate cannot be the self, because the aggregate is ever changing, not permanent, whereas you say the self is permanent. So therefore, that aggregate that is changing cannot be unchanging self. So that they do not have the nature of selfhood, as you said. You said that self is permanent. Since that is permanent, that aggregate, which is ever changing, cannot be that permanent self. Mm. Therefore, a permanent and an impermanent cannot exist as support and supported. Therefore, the self that you proclaim to be permanent and the aggregate that you proclaim to be impermanent, which we also accept that, or we also agree with that, they cannot be something that is, one is being supported and one is being supported by that, because one is permanent or one is impermanent. Impermanent and permanent cannot be the support and supported. So therefore, we cannot say, the self is permanent, whereas, um, the aggregates that are in support the self as, um, the body of that self, like my body, the body of that self, or the feeling of that self, this mind of that self, the consciousness of that self, so that cannot be, you cannot say that is being belong to that or that control that they're being as support and supported, because one permanent was impermanent. And so therefore, there will be a problem that to say, that the self is permanent, but the body of the self is impermanent. The mind of the self is impermanent. There is a contradiction. There have to be the one, if is that is being supported is permanent, then that is being supported should be permanent. Or if it is impermanent, then both of them should be impermanent. So that is why, again, and again, as I mentioned last week, that school of thought, one of the reasons why they come with this idea of the self being permanent is because they also feel, they also can see the aggregates are impermanent, ever changing. And when you die, your aggregate cease. And so therefore they feel if there is no permanent self, then there is no one to take reincarnation. So there must be someone who takes reincarnation, and therefore there is the self that takes reincarnation, and that self has to be permanent. Mm. Coming to that, His Holiness the Lama was sharing his stories, when he has a discussion with some of the those school of thought, expert or practitioner of those school of thought, they explain, they visualize the self on their forehand, and when they visualize the self here, sometimes they have profound kind of feelings, So anyway, but as from Nagarjuna point, a Buddha's point of view, we will really try to find where's the self. We cannot really find any part of body, any part of the mind. There is a story of one disciple of Milarepa, and of course, he came to listen to the teaching, on emptiness, selflessness. And he must have, ripening the karma from past, a lot of condition purified, and a lot of accumulated merit, and all the conditions are ripening for him to have understanding. So in that teaching, Milarepa told, check it out, analyze where is the self. You check it out, where is the self? Where is the I, the self? Is it in your body? Is it in your mind? Where is that? Or is it outside of your aggregate, or inside, within aggregate? And that disciple, when he tried to do that analysis, he had a realization of emptiness in that very moment. Have the realization of selflessness. Because again, for that person's hearing one time and doing that meditation one time, because of a lot of ripening of karma, and must have practiced in the past as well, a lot of imprint, so sometimes it can happen like that, in some cases. His Holiness says one time he was asking, again, same similar question to some in the teaching, and there was one asked, "Can you find self?" And then there was one Tibetan elderly lady, "Where do you feel self?" He says, "I feel the self somewhere here, somewhere here around chest, around heart, And His Holiness said, "How does it look like?" He said, "It looks like round." So that is how different people have feeling of feeling the self is here. Some might feel it is here, some might feel here, some might feel there, here, and they might feel differently, But if we really analyze this, you cannot really find and pinpoint, So yeah. Mm. So when you analyze with that, when you do that kind of, with that kind of reasoning and logic, when the deep analysis, if the so-called self do not exist, when you do that kind of, with that kind of reasoning logic, when you analyze, you cannot find the self, and therefore, that self, such self, cannot be existing. If that such self do not exist, permanent, partless, and autonomous self, if it does not exist, how can the so-called agent be permanent? If that self does not exist, then how can you say, there is the agent, permanent self, that is experiencing different experiences, sometimes pleasant experience, sometimes unpleasant experience, sometimes neutral experiences, or sometimes creating a virtuous, engaging virtuous action, sometimes engaging non-virtuous action, sometimes engaging into, neutral actions, sometimes sad, sometimes happy, So how can you say there is such agent which is permanent? Because when you analyze, there's no such self, there's no self, there's no such self. And therefore, if there's no such self, then you cannot establish there is some agent, someone, the self or I or someone, the agent that experience different experiences, that create different actions, that affect other persons or other beings, differently and so forth. So it's not possible, So that is. If there were things, then one could investigate their attribute to the world. Mm. Mm. So if there were the things existing, that is separate or autonomous and permanent from the aggregate, then, one could investigate the attribute in the world, then you can attribute, then, there should be, attribute of that self, as I mentioned before, um, you should be able to investigate and able to find the attribute of such existence or such object. So that means, the attribute or um, the quality of that, of that object, But if you analyze, there's no such attribute because there's no basis for that attribute. Because there's no such self. That is the basis for the attribute. So that is then similar, as Nagarjuna writes in his other. If there is no self, then there's no mind, Then if there's no self, then you cannot say there is my body, my experience, my feelings, my thoughts, my mind. It cannot, it can only exist if my mind only exists if there's me. My body can only exist if there is me. If there's no me, then there is no mind. Same way, therefore, if there is a such self, then you should be able to find, the body of permanent and autonomous self, the mind of permanent and autonomous self, but such are not to be found. And when you investigate, you are unable to find, and it cannot withstand such investigation, because the basis for that such attribute do not exist. Do not exist because that attribute had been completely negated by reasoning and logic. Such self cannot withstand. Such self cannot withstand with such analysis, the ultimate analysis, and therefore, it cannot exist. So, then verse number 7. If there is permanent self, if there's such a permanent self, then again there are many other problems. Since a permanent cannot function to cause in gradual or instant terms, if something is impermanent, then it cannot produce something gradually. If something is permanent, a permanent cause cannot produce gradual result or effect. But again, if we check in, if we look in, the reason something being produced gradually is because there's a change in the cause. Do you get it? Why is that result produced gradually? There's something, result or effect, being produced and coming into existence gradually because of the cause. Because of the cause. There is change in that cause, and as there is a gradual change in the cause, then there is a gradual productions of the result. But if it is a permanent, then there can't be change. It can't be changed. The cause cannot be changed because it is permanent. And if there is no change in that cause, how can there be a gradual production from that? The only reason why there is a gradual production is because there is a gradual change in the cause. Do you get it? But if there is no change in the cause itself, then there cannot be the result that gradually produce. Therefore, it can't be permanent. Also, other problem is instantaneous terms. Instead of something being produced gradually, it could be instant, immediately. The moment you get born, that moment you have already become aging. Or, you already have become age. Instead of gradual aging, the moment you are born, your hair all has become a, gray, while you already become weak as you get instantly like that. But it doesn't happen instantly like that. Or with our direct experience, it doesn't happen instantly like that. It happens gradually. From a child, you grow into a teenager, adult, and then, man, woman, and then, middle age, and slowly getting older and older. Gradual. Why? Because the cause, there's a slow transformation, change in the cause. And when there's change in the cause, then there's gradual transformation. But if that cause is permanent, then there is no change in that. And therefore, there can't be gradual change in the cause, and therefore there can't be a gradual result. Therefore, it should be instant. Everything will be instant. You will age instantly. Or if you plant a seed, it will grow immediately. The moment you, instead of coming from seed, sprout, and then coming slowly, and then the branch, then the leaves, flowers, and the fruit, whatever, instead of coming gradually, it will be produced immediately like that, instantly, the moment you. Why it doesn't happen instantly like that? Why? Because in order to grow that, there need to be certain cause and conditions that need to come. It takes time, all these cause and conditions to come to produce that fruit. And so there is a gradual change, gradual transformation in the cause and condition. And because of that, then that is how gradually you have that result. But if something's permanent, then, then it will be instant. It should come everything instant. Because it doesn't depend on the change of the cause. Gradual change. So, so both without and within, no such permanent entity exists. And therefore, if you try to find such self, permanent, partless, and autonomous, that is not dependent on the aggregates, if you try to find that self within the aggregate or outside of the aggregate, outside of that, no such permanent entity or the self can be found and can exist. If it cannot be found either within the aggregate or outside of the aggregate, then how can you say they exist? They exist. How can you say they exist? That is autonomous from the aggregate. Therefore, no such permanent entity or the self exists. If it were potent, why would it be dependent? So again, if that's such permanent self is potent, if it can produce a result, so then, is permanent self-potent that can produce a result, then, it would not be how can it be a dependent, How can it be dependent on other factors to produce the result? If it is dependent on other factors to produce the result, that potential to produce, when we talk about potentials, that means it has the potential to produce certain results, certain result. And to produce such result, if it has that potential to produce result, when it produces the result, does it depend on other factor or not? Do you get it? When it produces that potential, produce the result, does that potential depend on other factor or not? That is the question. If it depends on other factors, other cause and conditions, then how can it be permanent? How can it be permanent? If it depends on other cause and conditions, other factors like cause and conditions, it cannot be permanent. If it is dependent on other factors such as cause and condition. For it will bring forth everything at once, So again, it is similar like the previous. If it is permanent cause, is a permanent cause, then again, it will bring all the result, everything at once instead of gradual, The reasons why everything cannot come in once and how things come gradually is because there is gradual transformation, gradual change in the cause and condition. By depending on other cause and condition, other factors, cause and condition. By depending on other cause and conditions, then there is a gradual transformation change in that cause that lead to the gradual productions of the result. But if something is permanent, that is not dependent on other cause and condition to produce a result, then that permanent cause cannot have a gradual transformation and changes by depending on others, cause and condition, other factors. And therefore, if we produce the result, it should be able to produce the result all in once. Why not? Why cannot it produce once in all? Why cannot it produce all the result in once? The reason why it cannot produce everything in one is because the cause and condition needs many other factors, cause and conditions. When certain cause and conditions come together, it produces something. And another factor, cause and condition come together, then it produces another further and more, but not in once. But if it is a permanent, it doesn't depend on all these cause and conditions, then there's no reason to it to produce the result at once. Are you clicking? Making sense? How the reasoning, Nagarjuna's reasonings of negating with those different reasonings. How if you accept there is a permanent self and permanent cause, how you have all these problems, how you will not be able to defend and explain how everything, all this problem, how everything can, for example, here, how everything cannot come in once. What's the reason? There shouldn't be any reason why it can come in at once if the cause is permanent. But if the cause is impermanent, then of course If the cause is impermanent and it depends on other cause, condition, and factor, then definitely it cannot come in once because, more cause condition comes, then it changes the result. And again, more cause, other cause and condition, other factors come, again, it produce something else, and it produce something else. And instead of everything once, for example, the sprout, the leaves from that sprout, the stem, the leaves, the branches, and the flowers, and if there's a fruit, then the fruit. Why everything does not come in once, Why? Because certain cause and condition have not come together. When it is sprout, it has a certain cause and condition have not come together to produce the stem or the branches or the leaf. And later, when certain cause and condition come together, then it produces the stem, the branches, and the leaf. Still, it doesn't produce the flowers. Again, for produce the flowers, then it needs time and certain cause and conditions. And then even when you have flowers, still the fruit is not. So because there is transformation, there's continuous change in cause and condition that lead to productions of one by one. But if it is permanent, then you don't need all these cause and condition. You don't depend on all these cause and condition, then there's no reason to produce all in once. You plant the seed, and tomorrow you see everything coming together. Yeah, that would be cool. Definitely. But I don't know whether that will be cool for our aging. You are born and the next day, you are gray and you are already feeling, your mind not so clear and, your body is not so strong, I don't know whether we want that. And so we want to be selective, isn't it? In some, we want to have all in once, and some we don't want all in once. So then next line, that which depend upon something else is neither eternal, permanent, nor potent. Okay. That's anything that depend on other cause and conditions, that depend on other cause and conditions, cannot be permanent. If it depend on other cause and conditions, then definitely, due to those cause and conditions, there will be change in that cause and condition. Due to changing that cause and condition, that object will change. And therefore it cannot be permanent. It cannot be permanent. Also, it cannot be potent. Potent means potential to produce certain result. Okay? And the potential means it has not produced it, but there is the potential. And how can that potential be able to produce the result is when certain cause and condition together. It is still potent, it is still potential because certain cause and condition have not come together to produce the result. That is why it is still potential. When it is already being produced, it is no more potentials or potent. And the reason is potential because it has the potential to produce certain result when certain cause and condition together. If it is permanent, then there's no way of other cause and condition coming together and then changing that potential into something. you know. Potential is when that something transform or something bring another result or something transform into something else. And that cannot be happens, if something is permanent, you know. So therefore, so neither you can, so then there is all this problem if it is a permanent. If it were an entity, it would not be permanent, for entities are always momentary. So if the entity, the self, cannot be permanent, it must be impermanent and not permanent, because for entities are always momentary, but entity, the self is always changing. The self is always changing. When I was young, as a child, I was different. As I grow, from baby to a child, children, it's not same. There is a change. They change in your body. They change in your mind. They change in your perception. They change in your understandings. And as you become teenager, there's more change. Maybe some parent doesn't want to see that moment. And then you change from teenager to more adult. And then, you change it. Your view starts changes. A lot of time, so much view of our life changes so much. When we are young, as we grow up, a lot of things about life, a lot of things about yourself, a lot of things about the world, Sometimes our spiritual belief changes. Sometimes our political belief changes. Sometimes, our perceptions about humanity changes. So all keep on changing. There's a change in the self. It's always changing momentary. So something that is always changing momentary, that cannot remain same all the time. That nature, something that is in that nature, cannot be permanent. Cannot be permanent. Cannot be permanent. It must be impermanent. It cannot be permanent. So if that is the case, so then, so then what about, so up to here is negate. Then, but what about Nagarjuna or middle way school of thought yourself? Is there an impermanent self? Is there a permanent, is there a self or not? is there a agency, the self that experience different experiences, joy, pain, the self that engage in the different action activities, the self that affect others differently. Sometimes we affect them in a good way, helping and benefiting them. Sometimes we the self that affect others negatively, creating suffering, pain, sometimes more neutral. Is there such is you reject it, you refute and reject it, our view of the self, but do you have that self, that agency or not? So then the Nagarjuna's answer is, in my school of thought, there is a impermanent self. With respect to the impermanent entity, there's impermanent self that is imputed on the basis of aggregate, not as separate from the aggregate, not totally separate or not totally, in autonomous from the aggregate, but by depending on the aggregate, in relation to the aggregate, then impute as a self, and that the aggregate, which is impermanent, on the basis of that aggregate, there is so-called the self that is imputed on that, which is also impermanent. Such impermanent self that is imputed on the aggregates is the agency. That is the agency that take, rebirth after one after another. Is that agency create negative karma, positive karma, neutral karma. It is that agency that experience pleasant, unpleasant, or different experience. It is that self that creates sometimes harm to others, sometimes help to others. So we don't reject such self and such agency, but such self or the agency is impermanent. And impermanent self that exists, that has been imputed on the impermanent aggregates. So that is then the so that is the Nagarjuna's recently I was reading, someone sent, actually just recent time, someone sent me an article, and someone also mentioned about that article. And it's interesting, according to that articles, now the science also come to conclusion of no self, inherently existing self. And they said by accident, because they were doing some kind of experiment with the brain, left brain and right brain, because of and how the left brain is kind of misleading and giving a lot of misinformations. So in that article, it says with those experiments, the so-called self is just a thought, And it comes very similar to what Buddhist says. Self is merely imputed on the basis of aggregate. There's no such permanent self. There's no such autonomous self. There's no inherently existing self. There's no self that exists as self from its own side by itself. The so-called I or self or me is merely imputed on the basis of our aggregate. My body is not self, but when my body hurt, then I say I'm hurt today. Do you get it? When my body is not feeling well, I say I'm not feeling well today. Even the mind is not a self. When your mind is not clear, then you say I'm not clear today. When your mind is frustrated, then I say I'm frustrated today. Even though it's not a self. The mind is not a self. The body is not a self. But when something happens to our body, then we say, oh, I'm having this and that. When something happens to my feeling, my mind, then I say, oh, I'm having this and that. So the sense of the concept of the self is merely imputed on the basis of the aggregate. Nothing more than that. Mm. Mm. So, yeah, so such self is not negated, okay? So up to here, is the negations of the permanent, heartless, and the idea of permanent and heartless or single and autonomous self, and then presenting the Nagarjuna his own view of the self, by refuting that self. So that is the so in a so that is the detail, kind of more detailed explanation or commentary by Nagarjuna from the first line in that the root, the Guya Samaja root treatise. In the first line where it is of inherent beings, all entity are free. So that is the meaning of that. So first line now he more detailed, This world devoid of self and so on is utterly vanished by the notions of aggregate element and sense field, and that of object and subject. So here now is presenting the tenets of the two early Buddhist school of two Buddhist school of thought. There are four Buddhist school of thought. Babasika, Sotandrika, Siddhamatra, and Madhyamika, the minor Holy School. So the first two of schools. So all the Buddhist school of thought, all four Buddhist school of thought, they all reject. They all reject and refute permanent self. Permanent self. They all refute permanent self. None of the Buddhist school of thought accepts permanent self. Okay? They all refute permanent self. They all agree the self is impermanent. Self is ever-changing, momentary, impermanent. But the two school of thoughts, Babasika and Sautandika, they believe there is a partless, as we mentioned before, partless particle. Okay, and from that partless particles, and they spoke about many different level of the particles, starting the most what you call the most subtle is that partless, and from that partless, then it becomes a little bit more gross, particles. From that, it produces more growth, and then eventually it becomes growth where we can see with our naked eyes, for example, in terms of form, where we can see with that, whether by using some kind of endoscope or not, but to be able to see, but it will start with that partness. Through that partness, then there is a production of the external object. Same in the internal, even in consciousness, there is a partless moment of consciousness. And then that partless moment of many partless moments coming together, then becoming, giving more continuity with that continuity. And with that continuity, then they become parts, And again, from more subtle to more growth and growth. So and they say, that whether it's external object or whether it's the internal object, the subject, the mind, whether it's external object or whether it's internal, the mind itself, they all exist, truly existing. They believe they are truly existing. They believe they are truly existing, especially the basis of what everything, the partless, which is from where everything starts. That partless particle and consciousness is, especially that one is truly existing. So that is their view. And for them, if they do not exist truly, how can it function? They cannot understand how something can function if it is not truly existing, if it is all false. Do you get it? If this iPad is not truly existing iPad, is a false, how can this iPad function as an iPad? What is different from iPad in my image, my mind? Do you get it? Do you get it? I can have the image of the iPad in my mind. Yeah, there's image of the iPad in my mind and this iPad. My image of my iPad in my mind cannot function as this iPad. So therefore, this iPad to function as an iPad, it must be existing truly from its own side. Yeah, that is their view. Okay, that is not only their view. I think sometimes we have similar view. Those guys are not just a kind of mess up people. Very intelligent, has taught a lot. Have given a lot of thought. And that is sometimes also we feel that, my enemy in dream and my enemy when I'm awakened. My enemy is truly existence, whereas my enemy in a dream is not truly existence. Therefore, the enemy in my mind cannot harm me, whereas the enemy when I'm awake, not in the dream, can harm me. Do you get it? Therefore, the enemy not in the dream is truly existing from its own side, truly existing from its own side. Whereas the enemy in the dream is not truly existing. Therefore, it cannot function as enemy and hurt me and harm me. Are we clear? So they have a really good reason to feel and believe that way. Okay, and okay, and so then next is refuting that view as well. Okay, so maybe today we will stop here. I can take a couple of questions if there is questions. Yes, please. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there is a lot of discussion going. Again, I cannot kind of repeat all of them again. Um, that is why I think we need to fix that problem. Uh-huh. Not me saying, okay. I'm just reading from the okay. That is not my view. I'm just trying to explain what that is saying there. So that is too different. Okay. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Well, it is our frustrations, anger, hatred, and that frustration, anger, and hatred come from that self-grasping ignorance, because there is strong belief, self, on the basis of that, someone is trying to hurt me, someone is trying to steal me, my things, someone trying to hurt my family, my friends, or me. It all comes through that strong self-grasping. And once someone has understanding of that selflessness, not just intellectually, but with experience through meditation practice, when they have understanding of that selflessness, as is described, then you don't have that strong grasping of the self. When you don't have that strong grasping of the self, Even if someone try to be nasty with you, trying to insult you, trying to abuse you, you will not be so angry, so frustrated. Neither when someone steal you, steal yours, or someone try to hurt and harm your friends, family, whoever, you wouldn't be so disturbed and you wouldn't be so upset and angry with that. And that comes because there is no strong self-grasping thought, because of realization of the selflessness. So that is why this becomes key, and that is why all these earliest Indian masters spend so much time trying to explain this selflessness. Why they spend so much time, why they write so many books on just on this one on just one subjects. All the Nagarjuna's writing are mostly on this subject. Even the Buddha's, we have here, more than 100 volumes of Buddha's teaching. And among that, most volumes are on this, what we call Prajnaparamita Sutras, the teaching on emptiness, of selflessness. So they spend so much time on that because they understand, they see that the reason why we suffer ourselves and the reason why we become monster, as you said, that way we hurt and harm others and does such a destruction and damage to others is because of our negative emotions such as strong anger, strong frustration, strong hatred, and so forth, and how all this arises from that strong self-grasping. And once you don't have that strong self-grasping, then also you don't have so strong anger, hatred, and all of that. And so in order to have a correct understanding or realization that's selflessness, and that is where they spend so much time. And that is also why we're taking so much time here. It's not just to have some kind of intellectual philosophy differences and understand philosophies. That is nothing to do with our experience. It's not like that. It comes back to our experience. It's not like we are discussing about, what is happening in others' universe, which might not have direct relation to our experience at the moment. But these ones have a direct relation to our direct experience. We related to that. Okay. So yeah, I can see Karen. Yeah. This will be last question.
Geshe-la.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Geshe-la, excuse me, Karen's had a question since halfway during class.
no, I'm ready to go, Mary. It's okay. It's fine. So, okay. He's got the imputed, the dependent, and the ultimate existent. That's the framework of his argument. I mean, to some extent, there's a lot there. I don't have a problem with the dependent and the ultimate. It's the imputed, because there's a fundamental problem of causal inference, because it's not observable. So when you say the impermanent self is imputed or inferred on the basis of the aggregates, I don't know how you can prove a statement like that. Should I go back?
No, I didn't understand the last part.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got the computer too far away also. The impermanent self is imputed as the basis of the aggregate. The problem is there's a fundamental problem of causal inference or imputation in that it's not observable. So it's just the nature of inference, So that's a possible weakness in his argument. Can you comment on that?
How do we know that it is not observable? From Buddhist point of view, it is observable. It might not be observable by everyone. It might not be observable by our eye consciousness, but it is observable by enlightened mind. It's observable by many other minds.
The
So
impermanent, I'm talking about the impermanent self. You said it's.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
That I'm talking about that impermanent self. Yeah, impermanent self that has been imputed on the basis of aggregates. And again, I don't want to go too much, but if you also, as I said about that article, and it is a research done by someone who won a Nobel Peace Prize. On the brain, So anyway, I think also that will give you some ideas that might help, maybe, sometime Nagarjuna or Buddha explain with all reason and logic. Sometimes we are not ready to take on them. We always find some faults. And then scientists comes and then they explain differently or somehow, then it makes sense to us. Sometimes it is the way they explain it. Sometimes because we believe in the science more than those guys. And so again, it due to those different, sometimes it is based on what you believe on, because, and sometimes it's based on how it is presented, different way of presenting. It's the same thing, but maybe. So, but we, that will come, I think. Also, if these ideas of how everything is merely imputed and how things do not exist by itself, but how it is merely imputed. That is the most difficult point of understanding of the Nagarjuna point of view.
Yes.
If that is easy to understand, Asangas and all these earlier masters, they wouldn't be confused with that. If you read their writings, they are some of the greatest thinkers. They are some of the greatest philosophers, some of the greatest mind. Still they found hard to understand that. Still they find hard to understand how can something exist and function if it is merely imputed. How can this table function as a table if it is merely imputed, and that the table does not exist as a table from its own side? So it's not like that. It's even some of the greatest philosophers, thinkers, who have given so much thought, even they have some difficulty. That is why they have different points, and that is why this all discussions. And I think as we go through, with each school, and then when we come to Nagarjuna's own middle way school presentation, because that is what he does, because he refute all other school of thoughts, and then he present his what his belief or his school of thought or his view, and then maybe we can have more discussion. And because we don't want to get distracted now. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So we can do the dedications. Yes, Mary, are you starting?
Devadinu Duda Lama Sangye Duryone
Dovati Malepa Anju Sem Chorim Boche Ma Ke Pana Ke Kyoche Ke Wa Nyam Ba Me Pa Ya Ong Le Kong Du Pe Wa Ra Sho. He's holding the Lama's long life. Yeah. Jigden kamde pende malu pa kangle chungwe sambe yishe no kardin chungme denzen jaso la sowa deso shende lunju so. Yeah. Okay. Fearless teachers and assembly of children of the various ones, Savakas and Pratya Buddhas, vigorous laws and Father and the Son, together with lineage master, although object of refuge of the infinite land, please now bestow the virtues and goodness to accomplish this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request while starving single pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teaching and sole gateway to which benefit, happiness emerge, and for all mother sentient beings. You suddenly departed for peace, what a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessing, the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of Bodhichitta of the children of victorious one, may the smile of reincarnation swiftly beam in the glory for the fortunate disciple. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night. Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Thank you.